Hello everyone, my name is Michael Schofield and I'm going to give my own unique interpretation and version of events and just basically give my opinion on what happened with the UK general election and the subsequent fallout and the implications for the future. As we know by now, Theresa May did get a slim majority. Not what she wanted, of course. She wanted a landslide, major, big, vast, humongous majority, which she, of course, didn't earn. She didn't deserve it. Jeremy Corbyn had a much better campaign, fought the much better fight. What held her back then? First of all, foxes. What was she thinking with wanting to bring back fox hunting? Even if your Conservative base really think, yay, we love to kill these little bastards, these little orange so-and-sos, it was not a great move. When she took over as Prime Minister, she gave a speech that was aimed at getting the Liberals, the Progressives involved, the LGBT community, the women, the young people. Pretty liberal speech she gave at her informal, crappy version of an inauguration speech, and fast forward a few months, however long it's been, and now she wants to kill foxes. She wants to bring that back. Again, Countryside Alliance, people like that, society like that might like it, but really, that was a death knell. She even made sure that Ricky Gervais was properly going against her. He has some sway on the likes of the old Twitterverse. Although I am very sceptical as to how much celebrities have an actual effect on people, I think they're just buffering, they're just already playing to the crowd generally, but still not great for Theresa. Equally as bad was her dementia tax. We can look into the minute detail of these sorts of things, and she of course will not want it to seem like a dementia tax, but the perception is often greater and means more, especially in election campaigns, than the truth. And so a dementia tax, something that really seems to go against people in the last few years of their lives. These sorts of things are affecting more and more of us, seeing as more of us are living longer, we're having more and more people. Mental health crises, they're everywhere, sedentary behaviour, so to have any sort of perception here of cruelty, basic cruelty, with the Tories going back to being the nasty party, is not a good move. Equally so, something that would really turn the likes of me off and other people online is her crackdown on free speech online. So-called hate speech, extremist areas, which would be fine if that was linked and aimed at and carried out with the likes of Islamist extremists. It's not. that sort of rhetoric is against everything. Islamophobia, opinions on feminism, opinions on your politics, anything to do with politics. You just slightly go outside the bounds of the mainstream media and you will go into the territory of being an extremist or having hate speech. Even though most of it, I would so humbly assert, are opinions, and we need to push the envelope as we do with comedy so that we can then realise the actual policies that we should be having. How do we properly progress? Through most of human history, most progress would be deemed as offensive and hate speech and heresy, and people were killed en masse for their opinions. They still are in the world. We have to be so careful with thinking that you just restrict free speech and that's going to counter the problems. It doesn't work. China's not a beacon of civilization in terms of free speech and opinions and everyone having a wonderful time. This is not the road to go down. There are other avenues that we need to take. Education, secularization, teaching against religion, pushing away from these sorts of things. But again, that's all up for interpretation. But I would hope most people understand, because of a minority of trolls who make themselves who make themselves prominent and loud and always comment on all these videos, that they don't matter. That's a byproduct, something that we should deal with as a consequence of an overall free speech that gives us so much more and has to be protected. Theresa May shamefully was going to denigrate that, and she still might. On the other hand, Jezza Corbyn and his Corbynistas had an excellent campaign. I'm personally not a huge fan of the Jeremy Corbyn project, but I understand its appeal, and most people I know and are friendly with do like the guy, do like Jeremy, and people chanting his name. Oh, Jeremy Corbyn. Excellent campaign. Back to the core Labour message that is hard to properly go against, whatever you may think of the guy. Terrorist sympathiser, ? But tax the rich for the many, not the few. An excellent tagline. Trump's Make America Great Again is different. It's engaging. It's for the whole country. For the many, not the few. It's engaging, it's different, it's for the country. Excellent campaign. Scrap tuition fees. Enable the young people. Engage the young people. Mobilise the young people to come vote for him. And they did, compared to the past. Into the 70%, the young people came out and were voting like crazy for Jeremy Corbyn. If they could have voted 100 times each, they certainly would have. The reason it's been seen as a victory for Jeremy Corbyn, even though he did lose and the campaign was for Jeremy to win, his wild celebrations do pretty much show that he was not expecting to win, and that they did listen to the polls, even though the polls have been wrong in recent elections and referendums. But they were glad to be back in the game. Labour, they're going nowhere, they're out of politics forever, they've only got the disenfranchised, non-voting public behind them. It doesn't even work. Plenty of the majority of Labour MPs not on the side of Corbyn. He's going nowhere. He's not having a new Labour idea, so it can't work. Right, wrong. If we've learned anything from Trump and Corbyn, and I think they are two excellent examples, and two examples that should give us a lot of hope. Anything can be achieved. Not that everybody's vote matters necessarily. There's no actual evidence for that. But that some excellent individuals, excellent and awful individuals, can make the difference. And that it does bring hope for the future. And we should be pretty excited about that. On both sides of the political spectrum. Worth noting, that I will say, is that some have assumed because they went for Jeremy Corbyn that now they're against Brexit. I don't really see the logic too much. The North pretty overwhelmingly went for Brexit, despite so much of the campaign and the rhetoric was that it was only a few Tory MPs wanted Brexit, some crazy people, Nigel Farage's and UKIP members, they're the only people who wanted it. The North, Labour people, voted for Brexit. But at the same time, they didn't ever really desert Labour. And if you actually do your history, you look into Labour, they've never been properly pro-Europe. Not really. Winston Churchill helped create the European Union, and everything associated with this boys' club that we've created, old boys' network of the EU, well-intentioned, works in some ways, doesn't work in other ways. And Labour people who live in certain multicultural areas that have not particularly worked for them, or at least there are lots and lots of people in these areas now, so services are stretched, educational placements are limited, waiting lists are going to be high. It's just natural when you have a lot of people. It's going to be like that. And a lot of people actually also see the logic in being able to pick and choose who you have from around the world. If you have free movement within the EU, you're restricting movement in the rest of the world. Up for debate, all kinds of angles you could take in terms of it's a decent principle so that for us to be able to move around, share intelligence, share climate change tackling initiatives and ideas. Undoubtedly good things. If ever there was big war, it would help if we were just on the other end of the phone to each other, although I don't particularly see why those things are going to change too much not being in the EU. But nevertheless, if we have good relations, that generally helps us with our the good aspects of globalism. But the point is, we should not read too much into this Corbyn vote in terms of people moving away from Brexit. I don't think there's any logic there. Now we come to the deals that are going to be made, and this will of course change in the next few days, weeks, but with the Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP, and their anti-LGBT, anti-women, anti-same-sex marriage, rhetoric, opinions, mentality, That's going to be tricky for Theresa May to get a lot of people in the country on side, even Conservative voters, because the Conservatives are now so much pro all of those rights, because they've seen the sea change in the last few years, especially even in my lifetime, and so that is not going to be particularly popular. Well, it is worth noting, though, the hypocrisy of Labour people, of Corbyn people on this sort of issue is pretty staggering, with how much they're for the IRA, negotiating, talking, which, as far as I would assume, the IRA were pretty happy with. Oh, look, we have these people on our side as well. So Saddam Hussein did it with George Galloway. If you have certain people on the other side joining with you, gives your side so much more credibility. You can use them. There's one thing to be talking, and you need to talk to the enemy. Corbyn's right in that sense, but you have to be going somewhere with it. If you're just being used as a pawn in their game, they're just making fun of you, quite frankly, and they are having you on side to legitimise their cause, because look, it's not just us saying it, even some people on the enemy side are in agreement with us. You know, that in itself is not great. And if it had worked, why hadn't it worked in the decades that Corbyn was with the IRA? Why didn't the peace arise far earlier than the 90s? So the hypocrisy towards what certain organisations can do, and as well Islam in terms of, you know, the Labour's connections with Hamas and accusations of anti-Semitism, perhaps linked to that religion. You've got to be careful with throwing stones at the alliance with the DUP when your own house isn't particularly in order in certain ways. They all need to be more separate from these silly religions, in my opinion. Some don't like that. Well, sorry, that's the truth as I see it, and I think eventually that will seem like the mature position to take. But we are here now, and we need to cooperate with people, right? Corbyn people, we all agree with that. We need to cooperate as much as we can, make sure that we are leading the negotiations, not being a puppy dog to any of these organisations and their backward mentalities, bringing them into the 21st century and seeing what we can do with them. But of course, there's the danger, because of the lack of power of Theresa May and Corbyn, that these fringe parties could hold more sway than they deserve. Democracy is not perfect, folks. An interesting campaign, a campaign that Theresa May is severely regretting, as she showed when she fired her two closest aides, although she should probably be firing herself. She hasn't been good enough. The likes of Boris Johnson, and I thought Andrea Leadsom was actually more impressive than Theresa May in their initial campaign. Others could step in, and we'll see if they can challenge the cult of personality that's been built up around Jeremy Corbyn and his young, engaged base. How long they will last in their support for Corbyn in the years to come, we can't know. I would suspect it might drop off somewhat, but some of his basic arguments will always make sense. Some of his other arguments to do with nuclear war and it's a tragedy that Bin Laden died are not just offensive, but plain wrong and do put us in harm's way. And of course, the best way of understanding that is put your mind in the mind of terrorists and people who are against this country and against the Western world. They will laugh at that, they will enjoy that. You have to have a perception, as I said before, the perception and something that you promote as a way of being, as a way of carrying on, to go against the way the terrorists act and the terrorist mentality, and even the slightly more moderate people who help keep the terrorists afloat and going and having multi-billion-dollar organisations as ISIS is. You need some designed culture against that. That's the big worry with Jeremy Corbyn and why he isn't winning a majority, even though some of his social justice policies do make sense. If he could just align the social justice aspects with properly leading and leading from the front in a good way. There's nothing wrong with leading. Britain has an amazing history. Good, bad, horrible, beautiful, awful, hideous, amazing, inventive, innovative. Use the best parts of it. We have experience. Experience doesn't mean that you've been perfect, but we need to use it. We need to lead and take the Americans with us and see what can be achieved. A lot can be achieved when we actually lead, instead of just hoping for the best, hoping the bad people will get better. Hoping isn't enough. Sending prayers out isn't enough, as I think unfortunately we'll see again. A note to end on though, the only main bit of advice, apart from leading from the front, as any leader should know how to do already, Jeremy. Watch, you ready, Jeremy? That's how you do it.